Chapter 5 of Lorelei of the Red Mist by Leigh Brackett and Ray Bradbury. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A little laugh escaped Stark's lips. It was a dream, with fog over, under, and in between its parts. It wasn't real to the guard, who couldn't believe it. It wasn't real to these dead men either, who were walking around. He felt alone. He was the only live one. He didn't like walking with dead men. The captain of the guard came down warily, his green eyes suspicious. The suspicion faded. His face fell apart. He had lain on his fur pelts for months, thinking of his son who had died to defend Falga. Now his son stood before him, alive. The captain forgot he was captain. He forgot everything. His sandals scraped over stones. You could hear the air go out of his lungs and come back in a numb prayer. "My son, in Rann's name. They said you were slain by Fallon's men 100 darknesses ago. My son." A harp tinkled somewhere. The son stepped forward, smiling. They embraced. The son said nothing. He couldn't speak. It was the signal for the others. The whole guard, shocked and surprised, put away their swords and sought out old friends, brothers, fathers, uncles, sons. They moved up the galleries, the guard and the returned warriors, Stark in their midst. Threading up the cliff, through passage after passage, all talking at once. Or so it seemed. The guards did the talking. None of the dead warriors replied. They only seemed to. Stark heard the music strong and clear everywhere. They reached the green gardens atop the cliff. By this time the entire city was awake. Women came running, bare-breasted and sobbing, and throwing themselves forward into the ranks of their lovers. Flowers showered over them. "So this is war," muttered Stark, uneasily. They stopped in the center of the great gardens. The crowd milled happily, not yet aware of the strange silence from their men. They were too happy to notice. "Now," cried Stark to himself, "now's the time! Now!" As if in answer, a wild swirling of harps out of the sky. The crowd stopped laughing only when the returned warriors of Falga swept forward, their hands lifted and groping before them. The crying in the streets was like a far siren wailing. Metal made a harsh clangor that was sheathed in silence at the same moment metal found flesh to lie in. A vicious pantomime was concluded in the green moist gardens. Stark watched from Rann's empty citadel. Fog plumes strolled by the archways and a thick rain fell. It came like a blood squall and washed the garden below until you could not tell rain from blood. The returned warriors had gotten their swords by now. First they killed those nearest them in the celebration, then they took the weapons from the victims. It was very simple and very unpleasant. The slaves had joined the battle now, swarming up from the slave town, plucking up fallen daggers and short swords. They circled the gardens, happening upon the arrogant shining warriors of Rann who had so far escaped the quiet, deadly killing of the alive but dead men. Dead father killed startled alive son. Dead brother garroted unbelieving brother. Carnival indeed in Falga. An old man waited alone. Stark saw him. The old man had a weapon, but refused to use it. A young warrior of Falga, harped on by Linnell's harp, walked quietly up to the old man. The old man cried out. His mouth formed words. "Son, what is this?" He flung down his blade and made to plead with his boy. The son stabbed him with silent efficiency, without a glance at the body, walked onward to find another. Stark turned away, sick and cold. 1,000 such scenes were being finished. He set fire to the black spider silk tapestries. They whispered and talked with flame. The stone echoed his feet as he searched room after room. Rann had gone, probably last night. That meant that Crom Duw was on the verge of falling. Was Fallon dead? Had the people of Cromdu, seeing Budig's suffering, given in? Falga's harbor was completely devoid of ships, except for small fishing skiffs. The fog weighted him when he returned to the garden. Rain found his face. The citadel of Rann was fire-encrusted and smoke-shrouded as he looked up at it. A silence lay in the garden. The fight was over. The men of Falga, still shining with source life, hung their blades from uncomprehending fingers, the light beginning to leave their green eyes. Their skin looked dirty and dull. Stark wasted no time getting down to the galleries, through the slave quarter, and to the quays again. Linnell awaited him, gently petting the obedient harp. "It's over. The slaves will own what's left. They'll be our allies, since we've freed them." Stark didn't hear. He was squinting off over the Red Sea. Linnell understood. He plucked two tones from the harp, which pronounced the two words uppermost in Stark's thought: Cromdu. "If we're not too late," Stark leaned forward, "if Fallon lives, if Budig still stands at the masthead." Like a blind man, he walked straight ahead, until he fell into the sea. It was not quite 1,000,000 miles to Cromdu. It only seemed that far. A sweep of tide picked them up just offshore from Falga and siphoned them rapidly through deeps along coastal latitudes, through crystal forests. He cursed every mile of the way. He cursed the time it took to pause at the Titan city to gather fresh men, to gather Cleve and Mont and Assur and Bruce. Impatiently, Stark watched the whole drama of the source fire and the bodies again. This time it was the bodies of Cromdu men, hung like beasts on slow-turned spits, their limbs and vitals soaking through and through, their skins taking bronze color, their eyes holding flint sparks. And then the harps wove a garment around each, and the garment moved the men instead of the men the garment. In the tidal basilic now, Stark twisted. Coursing behind him were the new bodies of Cleve and Assur. The current elevated them, poked them through obsidian needle eyes like spider silk threads. There was good irony in this. Cromdu's men, fallen at Falga under Conan's treachery, returned now under Conan, to exonerate that treachery. Suddenly they were in Cromdu's outer basin. Shadows swept over them. The long dark falling shadows of Falga's longboats lying in that harbor. Shadows like black, culling nets let down. The school of men cleaved the shadow nets. The tide ceased here, eddied and distilled them. Stark glared up at the immense silver bottom of a Falgan ship. He felt his face stiffen and his throat tighten. Then, flexing his knees, he rammed upward. Night air broke dark red around his head. The harbor held flared torches on the rims of long ships. On the neck of land that led from Cromdu to the mainland the continuing battle sounded. Faint cries and clashing made their way through the fog veils. They sounded like echoes of past dreams. Linnell let Stark have the leash. Stark felt something pressed into his fist. A coil of slender green woven reeds, a rope with hooked weights on the end of it. He knew how to use it without asking. But he wished for a knife now, even though he realized carrying a knife in the sea was all but impossible if you wanted to move fast. He saw the sleek naked figurehead of Rann's best ship 100 yards away, a floating silhouette, its torches hanging fire like Budig's hair. He swam toward it, breathing quietly. When at last the silvered figurehead with the mocking green eyes and the flag of shoal shallow hair hung over him, he felt the cool white ship metal kiss his fingers. The smell of torch smoke lingered. A rise of faint shouts from the land told of another rush upon the gate. Behind him, a ripple. Then 1,000 ripples. The resurrected men of Cromdu rose in dents and stirrings of sparkling wine. They stared at Cromdu, and maybe they knew what it was and maybe they didn't. For one moment Stark felt apprehension. Suppose Linnell was playing a game. Suppose once these men had won the battle, they went on into Crom Duw to rupture Romna's harp and make Fallon the binder. He shook the thought away. That would have to be handled in time. On either side of him Clev and Mont appeared. They looked at Crom Duw, their lips shut. Maybe they saw Fallon's eyrie and heard a harp that was more than these harps that sang them to blade and plunder. Romna's instrument telling bard tales of the rovers and the coastal wars and the old living days. Their eyes looked and looked at Crom Duw, but saw nothing. The sea shepherds appeared now, the followers of Linnell, each with his harp, and the harp music began high. So high you couldn't hear it. It wove a tension on the air. Silently, with a grim certainty, the dead but not dead gathered in a bronze circle about Rann's ship. The very silence of their encirclement made your skin crawl and sweat break cold on your cheeks. A dozen ropes went raveling, looping over the ship's side. They caught, held, grappled, hooked. Stark had thrown his, felt it bite and hold. Now he scrambled swiftly, cursing, up its length, kicking and slipping at the silver hull. He reached the top. Budig was there. Half over the low rail he hesitated, just looking at her. Torchlight limned her, shadowed her. She was still erect. Her head was tired and her eyes were closed. Her face thinned and less brown, but she was still alive. She was coming out of a deep stupor now, at the whistle of ropes and the grate of metal hooks on the deck. She saw Stark and her lips parted. She did not look away from him. His breath came out of him, choking. It almost cost him his life, his standing there, looking at her. A guard, with flesh like new snow, shafted his bow from the turret and let it loose. A chain lay on the deck. Thankfully, Stark took it. Clev came over the rail beside Stark. His chest took the arrow. The shaft burst through and stopped, held. Clev kept on going after the man who had shot it. He caught up with him. Budig cried out, "Behind you, Conan!" Conan! In her excitement she gave the old name. Conan he was. Whirling, he confronted a wiry little fellow, chained him brutally across the face, seized the man's falling sword, used it on him. Then he walked in, got the man's jaw, unbalanced him over into the sea. The ship was awake now. Most of the men had been down below, resting from the battles. Now they came pouring up, in a silver spate. Their yelling was in strange contrast to the calm silence of Crom Dew's men. Stark found himself busy. Conan had been a healthy animal, with great recuperative powers. Now his muscles responded to every trick asked of them. Stark leaped cleanly across the deck, watching for Rann, but she was nowhere to be seen. He engaged two blades, dispatched one of them. More ropes raveled high and snaked him. Every ship in the harbor was exploding with violence. More men swarmed over the rail behind Stark, silently. Above the shouting, Budig's voice came, at the side of the fighting men. "Clev! Mont! Assur!" Stark was a god. Anything he wanted he could have. A man's head? He could have it. It meant acting the guillotine with knife and wrist and lunged body. Like this. His eyes were smoking amber and there were deep lines of grim pleasure tugging at his lips. An enemy cannot fight without hands. One man, facing Stark, suddenly displayed violent stumps before his face, not believing them. "Are you watching, Fallon?" cried Stark inside himself, delivering blows. "Look here, Fallon. God, no, you're blind. Listen, then. Hear the ring of steel on steel. Does the smell of hot blood and hot bodies reach you? Oh, if you could see this tonight, Fallon, Falga would be forgotten. This is Conan, out of idiocy, with a guy named Stark wearing him and telling him where to go. It was not safe on deck. Stark hadn't particularly noticed before, but the warriors of Cromdu didn't care whom they attacked now. They were beginning to do surgery to one another. They excised one another's shoulders, severed limbs in blind, instantaneous obedience. This was no place for Butic and himself. He cut her free of the masthead, drew her quickly to the rail. Butic was laughing. She could do nothing but laugh. Her eyes were shocked. She saw dead men alive again, lashing out with weapons. She had been starved and made to stand night and day, and now she could only laugh. Stark shook her. She did not stop laughing. "Butic, you're all right. You're free." She stared at nothing. I'll be all right in a minute." He had to ward off a blow from one of his own men. He parried the thrust, then got in and pushed the man off the deck, over into the sea. That was the only thing to do. You couldn't kill them. Butic stared down at the tumbling body. "Where's Rann?" Stark's yellow eyes narrowed, searching. She was here. Butic trembled. Rann looked out of her eyes. Out of the tired numbness of Butic, an echo of Rann. Rann was nearby, and this was her doing. Instinctively, Stark raised his eyes. Rann appeared at the masthead, like a flurry of snow. Her green-tipped breasts were rising and falling with emotion. Pure hatred lay in her eyes. Stark licked his lips and readied his sword. Rann snapped a glance at Butic. Stooping as in a dream, Butic picked up a dagger and held it to her own breast. Stark froze. Rann nodded, with satisfaction. "Well, Stark, how will it be? Will you come at me and have Butic die? Or will you let me go free?" Stark's palms felt sweaty and greasy. "There's no place for you to go. Falga's taken. I can't guarantee your freedom. If you want to go over the side, into the sea, that's your chance. You might make shore and your own men. Swimming? With the sea beasts waiting?" She accented the beasts heavily. She was one of the sea people. They, Linnell and his men, were sea beasts. "No, Hugh Stark. I'll take a skiff. Put Butic at the rail where I can watch her all the way. Guarantee my passage to shore and my own men there, and Butic lives." Stark waved his sword. "Get going." He didn't want to let her go. He had other plans, good plans for her. He shouted the deal down at Linnell. Linnell nodded back, with much reluctance. Rann, in a small silver skiff, headed toward land. She handled the boat and looked back at Butic all the time. She passed through the sea beasts and touched the shore. She lifted her hand and brought it smashing down. Whirling, Stark swung his fist against Butic's jaw. Her hand was already striking the blade into her breast. Her head flopped back. His fist carried through. She fell. The blade clattered. He kicked it overboard. Then he lifted Butic. She was warm and good to hold. The blade had only pricked her breast. A small rivulet of blood ran. On the shore, Rann vanished, up toward the rocks, hurrying to find her men. In the harbor the harp music paused. The ships were taken. Their crews lay filling the decks. Cromdu's men stopped fighting as quickly as they had started. Some of the bright shining had dulled from the bronze of their arms and bare torsos. The ships began to sink. Linnell swam below, looking up at Stark. Stark looked back at him and nodded at the beach. "Swell. Now, let's go get that she-devil," he said. Fallon waited on his great stone balcony, overlooking Cromdu. Behind him the fires blazed high, and their eating sound of flame on wood filled the pillared gloom with sound and furious light. Fallon leaned against the rim, his chest swathed in bandage and healing ointment, his blind eyes flickering, looking down again and again with a fixed intensity, his head tilted to listen. Ramna stood beside him. filled and refilled the cup that Fallon emptied into his thirsty mouth, and told him what happened. Told of the men pouring out of the sea, and Rann appearing on the rocky shore. Sometimes Fallon leaned to one side, weakly, toward Ramna's words. Sometimes he twisted to hear the thing itself, the thing that happened down beyond the gate of besieged Falga. Ramna's harp lay untouched. He didn't play it. He didn't need to. From below, a great echoing of harps, more liquid than his, like a waterfall drenched the city, making the fog sob down red tears. "Are those harps?" cried Fallon. "Yes, harps." "What was that?" Fallon listened, breathing harshly, clutching for support. "A skirmish," said Ramna. "Who won?" "We won." "And that?" Fallon's blind eyes tried to see until they watered. "The enemy falling back from the gate." "And that sound, and that sound," Fallon went on, feverishly, turning this way and that, the lines of his face agonized and attentive to each eddy and current and change of tide. The rhythm of swords through fog and body was a complicated music, whose themes he must recognize. "Another fell, I heard him cry, and another of Rann's men." "Yes," said Ramna. "But why do our warriors fight so quietly? I've heard nothing from their lips. So quiet." Ramna scowled. "Quiet. Yes, quiet. And where did they come from? All our men are in the city?" "Aye." Ramna shifted. He hesitated, squinting. He rubbed his bulldog jaw. "Except those that died at Falga." Fallon stood there a moment. Then he rapped his empty cup. "More wine, Bard, more wine." He turned to the battle again. "Oh, gods, if I could see it, if I could only see it!" Below, a ringing crash. A silence. A shouting, a pouring of noise. "The gate!" Fallon was stricken with fear. "We've lost! My sword!" "Stay, Fallon!" Ramna laughed. Then he sighed. It was a sigh that did not believe. "In the name of 10,000 mighty gods! Would that I were blind now, or could see better!" Fallon's hand caught, held him. "What is it? Tell." "Clev, and Tlan, and Conan, and Bluke, and Mont, standing in the gate, like wine visions, swords in their hands." Fallon's hand relaxed, then tightened. "Speak their names again, and speak them slowly, and tell the truth." His skin shivered like that of a nervous animal. "You said Clev, Mont, Bluke, and Tlan, and Conan, back from Falga. They've opened the gate and the battle's won. It's over, Fallon. Crom Dew will sleep tonight." Fallon let him go. A sob broke from his lips. "I will get drunk, drunker than ever in my life. Gloriously drunk. Gods, but if I could have seen it, been in it! Tell me again of it, Ramna." Fallon sat in the great hall, on his carved high seat, waiting. The pad of sandals on stone outside, the jangle of chains. A door flung wide, red fog sluiced in, and in the sluice people walking. Fallon started up. "Clev? Mont? Asser?" Stark came forward into the firelight. He pressed his right hand to the open mouth of the wound on his thigh. "No, Fallon, myself and 2 others." "Budeg?" "Yes," and Budeg came wearily to him. Fallon stared. "Who's the other? It walks light. It's a woman." Stark nodded. "Rann." Fallon rose carefully from his seat. He thought the name over. He took a short sword from a place beside the high seat. He stepped down. He walked toward Stark. "You brought Rann alive to me?" Stark pulled the chain that bound Rann. She ran forward in little steps, her white face down, her eyes slitted with animal fury. "Fallon's blind," said Stark. "I will let you live for one damn good reason, Rann." "Okay, go ahead." Fallon stopped walking, curious. He waited. Rann did nothing. Stark took her hand and wrenched it behind her back. "I said go ahead. Maybe you didn't hear me." "I will," she gasped in pain. Stark released her. "Tell me what happens, Fallon." Rann gazed steadily at Fallon's tall figure there in the light. Fallon suddenly threw his hands to his eyes and choked. Budig cried out, seized his arm. "I can see." Fallon staggered, as if jolted. "I can see." First he shouted it, then he whispered it. "I can see." Stark's eyes blurred. He whispered to Rann tightly. "Make him see it, Rann, or you die now. Make him see it." To Fallon, "What do you see?" Fallon was bewildered. He swayed. He put out his hands to shape the vision. I see Crom Duh. It's a good sight. I see the ships of Rann, sinking." He laughed a broken laugh. "I see the fight beyond the gate." Silence swam in the room, over their heads. Fallon's voice went alone, and hypnotized, into that silence. He put out his big fists, shook them, opened them. "I see Mont, and Asur and Cleve, fighting as they always fought. I see Conan as he was. I see Budig wielding steel again, on the shore. I see the enemy killed. I see men pouring out of the sea with brown skirts and dark hair. Men I knew long darkness ago. Men that roved the sea with me. I see Rann captured." He began to sob with it, his lungs filling and releasing it, sucking in on it, blowing it out. Tears ran down from his vacant, blazing eyes. "I see Crom Duh, as it was, and is, and shall be. I see, I see, I see." Stark felt the chill on the back of his neck. "I see Rann captured and held, and her men dead around her on the land before the gate. I see the gate thrown open." Fallon halted. He looked at Stark. "Where are Cleve and Mont? Where is Bluck and Asur?" Stark let the fires burn on the hearths a long moment. Then he replied, "They went back into the sea, Fallon." Fallon's fingers fell emptily. "Yes," he said heavily. "They had to go back, didn't they? They couldn't stay, could they? Not even one night for food on the table and wine in the mouth, and women in the deep warm furs before the hearth. Not even for one toast." He turned. "A drink, Ramna, a drink for everyone." Ramna gave him a full cup. He dropped it, fell down to his knees, clawed at his breasts. "My heart!" "Rann, you sea devil!" Stark held her instantly by the throat. He put pressure on the small raging pulses on either side of her snow-white neck. "Let him go, Rann." More pressure. "Let him go," Fallon grunted. Stark held her until her white face was dirty and strange with death. It seemed like an hour later when he released her. She fell softly and did not move. She wouldn't move again. Stark turned slowly to look at Fallon. "You saw, didn't you, Fallon?" he said. Fallon nodded blindly, weakly. He roused himself from the floor, groping. "I saw. For a moment, I saw everything. And gods, but it made good seeing. Here, Hugh Stark called Conan, give this other side of me something to lean on." Budig and Stark climbed the mountain above Falga the next day. Stark went ahead a little way, and with his coming the flame birds scattered, glittering away. He dug the shallow grave and did what had to be done with the body he found there, and then when the grave was covered with thick gray stones, he went back for Budig. They stood together over it. He had never expected to stand over a part of himself, but here he was, and Budig's hand gripped his. He looked suddenly a million years old standing there. He thought of Earth and the Belt and Jupiter, of the joy streets in the Jaccara low canals of Mars. He thought of space and the ships going through it, and himself inside them. He thought of the million credits he had taken in that last job. He laughed ironically. Tomorrow I'll have the sea creatures hunt for a little metal box full of credits." He nodded solemnly at the grave. He wanted that, or at least he thought. He killed himself getting it. So if the sea people find it, I'll send it up here to the mountain and bury it down under the rocks in his fingers. I guess that's the best place. Budag drew him away. They walked down the mountain toward Falga's harbor where a ship waited them. Walking, Stark lifted his face. Budag was with him, and the sails of the ship were rising to take the wind, and the Red Sea waited for them to travel it. What lay on its far side was something for Budag and Fallon of the ships and Ramna and Hugh Stark called Conan to discover. He felt damn good about it. He walked on steadily, holding Budag near. And on the mountain, as the ship sailed, the flame birds soared down fitfully and frustratedly to beat the stone mound, ceased, and mourning shrilly, flew away. End of chapter 5. End of Lorelei of the Red Mist by Leigh Brackett and Ray Bradbury.